Hello, everyone. I'd like to make sure everybody gets a chance to come back in and sit down before we start our second panel discussion. This panel discussion is titled Seasoned Veterans. I said to someone, it sounds like a barbecue. But we have up here some experts in this industry. And I'd like to first recognize and thank everyone on the panel, because this is it's different than doing a presentation on HR or doing...
Well, tonight...
Sorry. There you go.
Okay. Or doing a presentation on marketing or some other topic. This panel is here to talk to you about their personal experiences, their lives, their careers, and they're going to open up and share with you details of how they got to the position that they're in. So I think that's pretty cool. But there are many of you here that are here for the first time. I think we have something like 70 people that are first-time attendees at the Women in Industry event. And one of the topics that I like to talk about, or at least I want to explain, is years ago when I first became involved in the Women in Industry, I said to Becky, you know, I think this is a little bit odd that we would have a Women in Industry forum and not a Men in Industry forum. Wouldn't we really be upset about that if they had a Men in Industry? To which Tammy Miller replied, Sandy, we do, and it's called the golf course. And it really is. And it isn't by design, it just happens to be. I think we support people that we, not so much support, but we hang around with people that we're comfortable with, people that we know, people that you like to be around. And I am just thrilled to see that the Women in Industry events have grown and that the networking has gotten so strong, and the friendships that you're going to make or that you have made through the years will continue for the rest of your careers. That's amazing. One bit of advice I would say, if you are a first-time attendee or even if you're not, when you get back to your office, to your job, I suggest that you take a note and a pencil and not an email and handwrite a thank you note to your boss that allowed you to come here. Because they're investing in you and in your career and in your time. And it's a dollar investment, it's a time investment. And in this note, I suggest that you perhaps list maybe one or two items that you got a wow out of. Something that not only is going to help you in your career, but that's going to help your company. That's why they're sending you here. Something that you're going to go back to your department or your branch or your corporation, and you're going to be able to put it to use and really give back what they have given to you by letting you come to this event. So those are my couple of comments. Now, I would like to start off right away by introducing, or I'm going to have our panel introduce themselves. They're going to give you a little brief update on how they got into this industry. We have a list of questions that we've talked about ahead of time, but I also plan to kind of stop in between and open it to all of you so that you can ask questions or kind of piggyback off of some of the comments that are made during the panel discussion. So let's start right off with you. Go ahead. Dana.
Good afternoon. My name is Dana Ellison. I work for Graybar, and I'm a district vice president there. I've been in the industry for 16 years, so I started right out of college. I went to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign and was recruited from there by GE. So the way that they did that at the time was you went through a pretty lengthy interview process and ended up on a training program in any of their industries. And I ended up at GE Supply and was a DSLP, which was the name of the training program. It was a really cool way to start, and it was kind of an extension of college. Because we had 2 years to figure out what we wanted to do, which was excellent, and we got to see all of the different jobs in the industry as well as all of the different functions so that we could make a really good decision about which way we wanted to head. And through that, I worked in the warehouse, the counter, inside sales, outside sales, operations, and really got to learn the nuts and bolts of the industry. Over the years, a few of the other jobs that have kind of given me the experiences that, or made me seasoned, I guess, over the next 16 years include Director of Operations for a global sales team. We had a variety of P&Ls around the world. So for 4 years, I got to travel around and see all of our businesses throughout South America, Asia, Europe, Southeast Asia. It was a fantastic experience for me. And it was really the first time that I got to see that the culture and the work ethic and focusing on the safety for our employees, focusing on sales growth, everything that we do here in the United States is actually applicable around the world. And it was good for me because I got to see a number of places I probably would not otherwise have seen. Another job that I think has added to my development, I was VP of supply chain for that company. And in that, we had operations, and that included the warehouse and transportation, safety, operating expenses, as well as real estate. And I also had sourcing and inventory. So my team did all of the vendor negotiations with our vendors, many of you here. And we also owned the commercial side of it in terms of how to make the company more profitable. And I tried to make the supply chain team a commercially led team because in distribution, that's really what we do. I think everybody in some ways in sales. So it was a lot of fun to see that team sort of evolve and morph into a commercial team. I'm with Graybar now, and I have been for a year. It's been a fantastic ride. In January, my title changed to District Vice President, and in Graybar, we have 13 districts, and each one is geographically based. So my team is comprised of branches and salespeople on the commercial side, as well as growing sales and profitability. But we also have HR and finance, operations, in all of the different functions. So it's been an absolute thrill to work with these people. They're incredibly talented. And I think in this job, what I'm learning is a little bit of balance, because a lot comes at us every single day. And I know that does for all of you as well. And so the balance piece of it is something that I'm working with. This is the right industry for me. I absolutely love working in this industry. I think we work with really smart and talented people every day. You cannot win here if you're not hardworking and incredibly aggressive. We don't have, or I can't think of another industry where you get the opportunity not only to work directly with customers, but also to work directly with vendors and improve the profitability equation on both sides. It's a fantastic place to be, and I hope to be in it for another 16 years. I have 2 children. My son is 9, my daughter is 11. We've moved 5 times, and my husband and I have been married for 16 years as well. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Pam Erickson. So I'm Executive Vice President of Marketing and Business Development for NSI Industries. It's interesting, when you come to one of these events, you look at the women up here and you think, wow, they've always been at this place in their life. And I've got to tell you, my first job was as the Soils Secretary, SOIL. And it doesn't sound very glamorous, and it wasn't. A year later, I was promoted to the Water Secretary. I was so proud. It was a big moment. You have no idea. Anyway, so I worked for that company for about 10 years, and then I moved to an aerospace company. And when I was at the aerospace company, I started in the engineering department. I was a technical writer, and I found that I didn't have enough to do. And I found the way to progress, and this really wasn't a strategy, though it would have been a good one, but it really wasn't my strategy. But when I had time on my hands, I would go to other departments. I would go to the sales department and say, how can I help you? What can I do? And they said, wow, we really like her, and we want to work with her. So they moved me into sales administration. And then when I needed something to do there, I would go over to our one-person marketing department, and I'd say, what do you have? What can I do? How can I help? And that's how I got into marketing, and that was sort of the spark where I said, ooh, marketing, I sort of like this. This is really better than technical writing. I really like it. So it was better than soil for sure. It's a great opportunity. But I worked my way through that company, and I was hired into the electrical industry by Millbank Manufacturing. I started there in 2006 as the director of marketing. I worked there for 4.5 years, and then I left Millbank, which is based out of Kansas City, born and raised, lived in Kansas City my whole life, until I took a job with Affiliated Distributors as VP of marketing for the electrical division. They're located in Philadelphia. My husband was still located in Kansas City, and we sort of did a commute thing every other weekend for 3.5 years. And that got incredibly hard to do over time, being separated 1,000 miles from everybody that you know and love. So an opportunity came my way for the position at NSI. A gentleman that hired me at Millbank, Bruce Bittner, he had just taken over the CEO position at NSI Industries, and he was VP of sales for Hubble prior to that. So, connections in the industry matter. Every position that I've held in the industry has been because someone told me about an opportunity that I didn't know about and or recommended me for a position. So, the networking aspect of everything that we have here is so important to moving to the next level in your career. As children go, my children are older, they're in their 30s, but I do have 2 stepchildren that are in their teens. All 4 of them are boys. I have a grandson, a granddaughter, and a grandson due tomorrow. So,
Wow.
Yay.
Yay.
But I'll be back on Friday, so I'll see them then. Thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's exciting to see everyone here today. I was at the first Women in Industry Forum, and it was a much smaller group. It's great to see how we've grown and progressed. I wonder, though, how I became a seasoned veteran. When I was on the plane this morning, I was kind of thinking about that, and I had a nice surprise. There was a gentleman sitting next to me, and I thought he was about my age, and he asked what I do, and I said I was the CEO at Border States, and he goes, "My, you are really young to be a CEO." So I felt pretty good about being a veteran. But just a little bit about myself. I grew up in a very, very small community. My parents didn't have much money, had a very humble childhood. We worked very hard, and I learned a lot about customer service and giving back from my parents and growing up in a small community. And that has really helped me throughout my professional career. I joined Border States after having a few years in public accounting. My undergraduate degree is in accounting. I started my professional career as a CPA doing audits. And that was a great experience for me and for anyone, I think, in the business community. But after actually 8 years doing that, I knew I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. And I was kind of at a crossroads. I needed to decide if I wanted to be a partner in the firm. So in the fall of 1990, I decided to look for something else. And my first call was to my favorite audit client, Border States Electric. The company was less than $100 million in sales at the time and had 9 or 10 branch locations in 3 states. And at that time, the company really didn't do a lot of succession planning, but their CFO was 61 and a half years old. And I asked what the plan was for Dean's retirement. And they said, well, that's a great question. Let us talk about that. We'll get back to you. So the executives did. They didn't post the job, didn't do any other interviews. I joined as the accounting manager and worked with Dean for 1.5 years before he retired. Not too many accounting managers end up in the CEO seat. And it isn't always easy to do that because folks in the organization look at you as the bean counter, the anti-risk, anti-salesperson. So for me, I took a lot of risks in my career. And a lot of folks don't do that and are not able to accomplish their goals and their full potential because they don't take risk. And I'd like to talk maybe about that a little bit more as we get into the program. But one big risk that I took was in 2003. I had had all of my career with Border States in accounting and finance in the corporate office in Fargo. And we had expanded quite a bit. We had branches in the Southwest, so in El Paso, Albuquerque, Farmington, New Mexico, Phoenix, Tucson, and Juarez, Mexico. Those branches came on through acquisitions, startups. We hired people from a lot of different companies. Those branches knew how to sell, but we weren't making a very good return, and the culture just wasn't consistent with our company. So our president at the time asked me to go down with him to work on a plan to improve the culture and the profitability. The first day of the planning, we went out on the balcony. He was a smoker. We took a break, and he said, "Why don't you come down and run the region?" I had never worked in a branch, managed a branch, didn't really know much about products, didn't know our customers, didn't know our vendors, and now I was signing up to manage the profitability and culture of 6 branches. Think that was a bit of a risk? You know, I didn't hesitate for a minute to say yes. As soon as he asked me, I said, yes, I can do it. Went back to my hotel room that night and said, what the hell did I agree to? Called my husband and said, we're moving to Phoenix. But it was a risk. And I think many women don't take full advantage of their career, their potential, and the opportunities because they are afraid to take some risk. You know, a lot of the surveys show that women will not raise their hand for a job or a project unless they're 100% sure they know how to do the job. Whereas men will do that when they're probably 70% confident that they have the experience. Why do we hold ourselves back? I've had a long career with border states, a great career. I became the CEO in 2006. We were a $485 million sales organization. We just finished our fiscal year on March 31st, and our sales are over $1.7 billion. We've had a lot of great growth, and I think probably the secret for my success has been having a clear vision, sharing that vision, setting clear goals, helping people see the goals, giving them the tools they need, and holding people accountable, and then celebrating the success. And I hope as we have some time here, we can talk more about those areas. But that's kind of my story. I live in Fargo. I have a great husband. We've been married for 27 years. And we have a very non-traditional career. He stays home and takes care of everything for us. I was the first board chair, female board chair for NAAD, which was just a fabulous experience. And everyone said, oh, that was so non-traditional and it must have been such a challenge for you. Actually, it was a big challenge for my husband because most of the folks on the NAAD board are men, and most of the spouses are women. So when you go to board meetings, the spouse programs are for women. And when I was the board chair, and I think this is still the same way, the spouse of the board chair hosts some brunches in their suite during the board meetings. My husband is really quite a trooper. He hosted those luncheons, breakfast, whatever they were. And after the first one, I said, well, Craig, how did it go? And he said, I held my own until all of these women had children getting married this summer, and they were talking about strapless undergarments for their mother of the bride dresses. So anyway, you know, we all talk about the challenges for us as being women in this industry. Some men have some challenges too, so be a little sympathetic for them.
Good afternoon. My name is Dana Mavros. I'm the president of Brook Electrical Supply in Chicago, which is a Sonnebar company. Non-traditional path to where I came. Chicago native, liberal arts undergrad. I graduated with a degree in photography and lighting design. So not exactly a traditional path to where I'm sitting today. Came out of school, worked for a small company, started in customer service and project management in kind of advertising and photography field. At the time, to date myself, I've been in the industry over 20 years. I went to take a PowerPoint class because it was a new thing coming out, and I wanted to know how to do a PowerPoint presentation. And I met a gentleman by the name of Peter Kakuzian, who at the time worked for Square D. And he turned to me and he said, have you ever heard of a company called Square D? And I said, no. And he said, well, we have this job. I'd like you to come and interview. I was like, okay. So I go online that night, look it up, and was like, wow, they move electricity. This is kind of neat. People actually need what they sell, need what they manufacture. This is kind of interesting. So I went to interview with Pete and a gentleman by the name of Ralph Harris at the time at Square D, and they hired me into their organizational development and education department, which was a division they created for training and for project management to start people who didn't come necessarily from the industry. So the first project I had to create a Electricity 101 online for new employees, which was kind of interesting because I had to learn about it. So I sat in a room with a bunch of people who had been in the industry for 40 years, and they taught me what they did, how electricity moved and what Square D did and why they made what they made. And then I can remember I was there about 3 months, still not knowing if this was the right career path. My boss called me in his office, and he said, Dana, he said, we formed a joint venture with Schneider Schweier, and we're building a busway system plant in Guangzhou, China. You need to go to the busway plant in Oxford, Ohio, and figure out how we're going to train everybody in China to build busway systems. This is your first project. Here's your budget. Here's the engineers you're working with. Here's all this. And he looked at me and he goes, do you have any questions? I'm like, where's the plant in Oxford, Ohio? Because I had no idea. I never traveled for business, never did anything. And that's how I started in this business, and from that point forward, fell in love with it. Went to Oxford, Ohio, and learned about what we did. And so I never looked back. I was fortunate at the time, after doing a couple of successful projects, to be in a staff meeting. At a time, a gentleman by the name of Ken Fairley was running a $3 billion company, and I was sitting in the staff meeting of these people running this company, and I sat there thinking half of what they talked about, I had no idea what they were talking about. And I wanted to know how you got to that room, right? And so I took one of the gentlemen aside who kind of was a mentor to me, and I said, how do you get here? How do you get to be in this room? How do you get to run a $3 billion company? And he looked at me and he said, well, you have to work hard. He goes, you have to go start at the beginning. You have to go out and have a target on your back, and you have to go learn how to sell, and you have to learn the product, and you have to do every job on the way up. Very old school thinking, but it's what I did. So in my career, I've spent several years at Square D. I spent over 8 years at Hubble Industries, 8 years at Cooper Industries, became the president of Brook Electric in Chicago almost 4.5 years ago now. But along the way, I called on Border States and Fargo in January to get purchase orders because Barry Nelson, the purchasing manager at the time, said, if you want credibility, you don't come in the summer, you come when it's 40 below zero. And learned along the way in, La Crosse, Wisconsin, in 18 feet of snow, selling lighting fixtures, and learned along the way all the jobs. So at this point, when I became the president of Brook, there isn't a job that I haven't done along the way. And so it gives you credibility as a leader. What was interesting is I'm a liberal arts grad, so we talk about finance and accounting. I had my first P&L responsibility. I ran Canada for Progress Lighting at the time. And I had a controller. His name was Magdi. He had been a controller for 40 years. And I come into town. First time I have P&L experience. I'm 30 years old, don't have a finance background. And he starts showing me all the financials, and he's explaining to me, and I can understand it, and I trust him, but I have no idea what questions to ask. And I'm looking at all this P&L. I'm looking at, freight coming in and out and taxes and all this stuff, and I'm responsible for now. And I went, time to go back to school. So I went and got my MBA in finance from the University of Chicago while working, traveling the country. And it was the best thing I ever did. When you talk about risks, it was the most challenging thing I ever did in my life, to go to one of the best finance schools in the country and go for 19 months and get a full MBA while working full time. It almost killed me, but it was one of the biggest risks I ever took because completely out of my comfort zone. But it's the business world we live in, and it's what you need to know to have credibility. And to know how to ask the questions, right? So you can't be afraid to continue to learn and to ask the questions. And along the way, lots of things I didn't know, but you had to continue to ask. And I had great mentors and great coaches, and I have a great opportunity to come to Brook and create the culture that I saw in that boardroom in Square D 21 years ago. I had the opportunity to come 4.5 years ago and to create the culture in this company that we wanted to create, and I thought we wanted to create. So,
Great.
If I could add, you mentioned getting an MBA and then working all the different jobs. And I too went back and got an MBA when I started at Border States. And I had the finance background, but not the marketing and sales and strategy and all of that. So it was a great experience. And I think going to school and working full time really helps you figure out how to manage your time. And then you had talked about working every job. I didn't work every job, But you can bridge, I think, those gaps by surrounding yourself with good people. So if I needed to go out to a customer and I was concerned about not having product knowledge, well, I would bring the account manager or a product specialist with me to kind of augment my gaps.